me introduce the other speaker, who is Dr. Michael Hauser, also employed here at the Czech Academy of Sciences, Philosophy Institute, but in the Department of Continental Philosophy. His research interests revolve around Adorno, Zizek, as well as Badiou, and he's also interested in contemporary social and political phenomena, for example, populism. He's also the author of 2 books, Ways Out of Postmodernism and Capitalism as a Zombie. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I would like to come to the point. Allow me to present 3 theses on dialectics as for its social and cognitive meaning in present days. I will draw upon Adorno, presumably. The first thesis. The conceptual meaning of dialectics is historically conditioned. Its place in science, means humanities and social sciences, as much as its place in culture and politics results from specific historical circumstances. We can come across a remarkable passage in Adorno's Negative Dialectics. This is the passage called The Crisis of Causality. Adorno says that, quote, the more unequivocal the circumstances, the easier was it to talk of causality in history. Hitler's Germany caused World War II in more exact fashion than the Kaiser Germany caused World War I. But there is a recall into tendency, unquote. Adorno noticed that the term causality depends on the opacity or visibility of society. If we can determine the cause of a war, we can speak freely about causality. Adorno continues in the contemporary society, that was the society in the 1950s and 60s, when Adorno wrote the book Negative Dialectics, was the tendency towards a point where the universal dependence of all moments on all other moments makes the talk of causality obsolete. Only that society itself remains the cause. Someone can remind of Althusser's concept of structural causality, but I put it aside. Adorno succeeded in depiction, in having a picture of the ultra web of contexts as a shape of society. That was the society formed by so-called post-capitalism. Adorno's depiction is, I quote, every state of things is horizontally and vertically tied to all others, touches upon all others. It
touched by all others. Unquote. Adorno spoke about the hard position of Marxism under these circumstances. In Adorno's view, Marxism lags behind a condition in which not only the machineries of production, distribution and domination, but economical and social relations and ideologies are inextricably interwoven, and in which living people have become bits of ideology. It's hard to clearly differentiate production and distribution. We can remember the contemporary hybrid corporations that are focus on hybrid production, distribution, advertising, building social nets, and so on. It's hard to distinguish two spheres of production, distribution, economic and social relations, ideologies, and so on. Exactly 40 years later, Alain Badiou, in his book Logics of Words, provides us with a formalization of the society Adorno depicted. Badiou created a formalization of the society appearing as to ultra condensated web of contexts by using the term an atonic word. Badiou claims that formally the atonic word is the word that is devoid of points, which that means the points means a correlation between the infinite totality of the word and the instance of the decision. But for this moment, I put aside this strict Badiou's depiction for formalization points. It's a complicated matter. But Badiou says that the atonic word can be corroborated empirically as well. Badiou's depiction is that the atonic words are simply words which are so ramified and nuanced or so quiescent and homogeneous that no instance of the two, and consequently no figure of decision, is capable of evaluating them. Quote, the modern apology for the complexity of the word is really nothing but a desire for generalized atony. Recently, we have witnessed the orientations of Anglo-American gender studies advocating the abolition of the woman-man polarity and so on. And we witness the dissolving of the major dialectics polarities, such as being and appearing, one and multiple, same and other, and so on. From these 2 points of view, from Adorno's and Badiou's, we can conclude that we live in a world that dissolves or have dissolved two prerequisites of dialectics. The main prerequisite is, of course, to polarity, the existence of polarities, being, non-being, and so on, by the social process which was reflected at the level of conceptual formatting and culture formatting, and the Adorno's and Badiou's view can be perceived as to buttress of the thesis that concrete historical circumstances are or condition to meaning of dialectics, their existence or non-existence in a sense of its reality in a social context and its reality in culture and in the conceptual work in humanities and science. I can give an example of two concepts that reflect the society as the ultra condensed web, or Badiou's atomic world. It is so-called hyper object coined by authors developing so-called new materialism or object ontology, like Timothy Morton, Rosie Braidotti, Manuel de Landa, and others. Hyper object is the object that is massively distributed in time and space relative to humans. Timothy Morton's example is the object global warming or climate change. The key characteristics of hyper object is that that the object is layered by many dimensions, and we are not able to cognitively cope with this object. The hyper object is defined by the fact that it is the object beyond our capacity of understanding. Another example of the hyper object is the capitalism. This is a claim that was made by Manuel de Landa. Manuel de Landa conceives capitalism as the concrete assemblage of many national markets, bazaars, commodities, experiences, colors, texts, ideologies. And he says that we should avoid using reified generalities such as to market or to state as a universal notion. In my view, to hyper objects and other concepts that can be described as infinitely multidimensional concepts are the crucial embodiment of the ideology of the contemporary ethnic world. Why can we postulate this thesis? From Adorno's point of view, these anti-dialectic concepts are ideological because they express the given society as being light, capitalist, ultra-condensed web of context. Adorno claims that this sort of concepts prevents the rational penetration which dialectical thinking sought to promote in the service of progress. So it's a quotation from Adorno. This is one reason for claiming that hyperobjects are ideological one. They prevent us from rational penetration of the contemporary world because they are multi-layered, multi-dimensional, many other dimensions, nets, contexts. From Badiou's point of view, these concepts are ideological because they uphold, I quote, founding axiom of democratic materialism that there are only bodies and languages. There is no truth. In other words, nothing can change when anti-dialectic thought fascinated by infinitive multiplicity prevails. So we can conclude that from these 2 points, from Adorno's and Badiou's criticism of ideology, anti-dialectic concepts of climate change, capitalism, into view of new materialism, are ideological because they prevent us from changing the conceptual precondition of changing the given form of society, which produces massive inequalities on global scale and environmental crisis. From this follows my second thesis on dialectics. A revival of dialectics creates conceptual conditions for a progressive social change. In other words, the introduction of the thought comprising the instance of two or polarities in Badiou's phraseology is preconditions of the of social transformation and to resolving of climate environmental crisis. The third thesis: under the present circumstances, that is under circumstances of atomic war, the starting point of this revival of dialectics can have the shape of antinomic dialectics. Here I propose to develop Adorno's antinomic dialectics, but against the background of the atomic war. This will be only outline of antinomic dialectics for this war. The point is that we should replace hyper-objects and other multi-dimensional objects with the formation I call antinomic constellation. The first prerequisite is the reconstruction of the concept of the social object, such as capitalism, global change, property, social relation, and so on. By doing this, we can come to the renewal of objectivity. Adorno, in the chapter on constellation in negative dialectics, says that the concept is centered about the object. For instance, the concept of market is centered about the social object, that is the real exchange relations in this or that locus, and the real exchange in its general evolution. The evolution is important stress in Adorno's understanding to concepts. As Adorno told us, the history is locked into objects. When we form the concept of market, we should be mindful of, quote, the historic positional value of the object in its relation to other objects, unquote. Here there appear two poles to term non-identity and identity. As regarding non-identity, Adorno recommends us to become aware of the gap between each concept and the object that the concept attempts to capture. Plainly, simply said, between the concept and social reality which is formed by the concept. There is everlasting gap between these two levels. When we develop this conceptual formation, we can gradually construct an universal concept of capitalism from the particular concepts of market, social relation, and so on, with regard to non-identity. But the other side is identity. We can speak about the definitions. Adorno mentioned that concepts are necessary. I quote, a thinking, yeah, I finish. A thinking whose course made us incapable of definitions would be sterile. So, these definitions are not fetishized because they are connected with the awareness of non-identity. The conceptual constellation capitalism is a form of unity which is devoid of violent subjection of the particular. And this kind of unity to constellation enable us to focus on antinomies among the particular segments of the constellation. For instance, the antinomy between private property and Hartz Negri's commons. And we can concentrate on this polarity, which is polarity embedded in the constellation, not isolated polarity. And we can so-called intensify this polarity to such a degree that another constellation begins to form. This will be the constellation which is in a definite negation, not in an abstract negation. And this new conceptual constellation is, of course, socialism or communism. So in this way, the antinomic constellations can gradually replace hyper-objects and others, and become the conceptual preconditions of the social change, which would tackle the environmental and other crises. Thank you for attention.